And I was in hiding for almost 3 months. We sent our kids to Cuba, even Anna, who was, as I say, 3 months old. We hid with them for about a week or two, maybe. That was very hard because they were just kids. The oldest was 8, and then I had a 5-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old daughter, and my youngest, who was 3 months old. And, you know, you can't really hide kids. They're going to go to the window and they're going to ask this and that. And so maybe a month into that experience, we sent them to Cuba on their own, alone. And then as soon as I found a way to get out of the country clandestinely, I had to go to Cuba from Mexico via Czechoslovakia. That's the way you did it in those days. You know, that was the bridge, so absolutely. I mean, we went on to Cuba, as I say. We rejoined the children. We lived there for 11 years. And that was really quite an extraordinary time. I mean, they were great years of the Cuban Revolution. They were years before a lot of the problems began to surface and so forth. So I learned a lot there, and I always felt it was an incredible privilege to raise my children there in an atmosphere that was so justice-oriented. And my 2 oldest they did their undergraduate work there. And then I moved on to Nicaragua. I lived there for 4 years in the early years of the Sandinista Revolution, which was, again, another great experience. And for a poet, a particularly incredible experience because, of course, Nicaragua is a country of poets. And so that was very interesting in a different kind of way. And then I decided to come home. I really needed to come home. You know, I was getting older. I was almost 50. I was tired. My children were doing different things. And I think language drew me home. You know, it was really, I needed to come back to New Mexico, to the desert, to the images that fill my work and that are important to my own poetry. And I've never written poetry, my own poetry, in anything but English. And I just longed for that language. I mean, I functioned in Spanish. I speak Spanish with my children, but English was always my writing language, my creative language. And my parents were getting older, and so in 1984 I decided to come home, and I wanted to get my citizenship back, and my idea was to get a green card. And you know, I didn't have the concept that they could keep me away from my own country, because I always thought of myself as a U.S. as American. I mean, even though those other countries gave me a lot and they live in me in some important ways, I just always thought that this is where I'm from. And it didn't turn out that way. I mean, I came back and I applied for the green card, and immediately, it took them about a year, they denied me what they call adjustment of status, and they accused me under McCarran-Walter, which is the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act. The official wording of the denial was, your writing goes beyond the happiness and well-being of the United States, something like that. It's a paraphrase, but you can get the real wording. And so they denied me, and I was just astonished. So they gave me 28 days to leave the country. That was, by that time, it was early 1986. But the Center for Constitutional Rights here in New York City decided to defend me, and PEN America defended me, and, you know, Arthur Miller and Grace Paley and Norman Mailer and so forth did a countersuit on my behalf, and you know, it was a 5-year struggle, and I kept losing in each instance. I went to trial, and it was very interesting from the viewpoint of being a poet, because, for example, one of the questions that the government attorney asked me at my first trial in El Paso was, have you ever written a poem in defense of free enterprise? Presumably, if I could say yes, you know, that would be a point in my favor. And they used the magazine a lot against me. You know, they said, you know, you edited this magazine that published Marxists, and you know, all kinds of things like that. And I lost there, and then I lost in Washington, and then I finally won an appeal at a level that's called the Court of Immigration Appeals, also in Washington. And it was a tremendous surprise win. I don't think that my lawyers really expected it, and I didn't expect it, because they not only gave me my residency, but they gave me my citizenship back. And it was a good case because it set a precedent for many other cases. And I was very conscious the whole of those 5 years that I was privileged. You know, I had all of the support from writers and artists and all kinds of people. And there were hundreds of thousands of people who are kicked out of this country every day, who have no legal representation, who have no support, who have no money. And so I felt that in a way I was fighting for a lot of people, and that felt good, even when it didn't feel good. So.